Hi, Shreya. Can you hear
How
me?
are we doing? I can.
Okay.
Okay, incredible. Shahnaz, thank you
Yeah.
so much for taking time out today for this session. I know so many people have been constantly messaging us the minute we release the schedule. So excited to hear your insights.
Oh, thank you for having me, Shreya. As you know, I've been a fan of you and DSSC for a
Oh,
very, very long time. And I've been watching See You at 4 now for the week. And I must say, the quality of discussions, your engagement, it's amazing. And for all the people signing in as well, hello. And do leave your questions, as Shreya said, and we'll try to answer them as the best as we can.
No, absolutely. I don't know if you heard me, but basically, I told everyone who's tuned in, you're one of those few people in the fashion industry that I always look forward to. I just love the kind of like gravitas and thought and analysis in your pieces. So it was very obvious when the team was debating and discussing who do we want to speak with at 4 p.m. about what's the future for this industry. I think your name was the universal, like, everyone's hand went
You
up.
are way too kind, Shreya. You are way too kind. And in these times, I have to say it feels good, but thank you, but enough now.
You're gonna get more love from all the people tuning in. Okay. Shahnaz, I mean, where does one even start? I mean, the pandemic has left no company in the fashion industry untouched. I mean, fashion weeks have been postponed, multiple events and shows have been cancelled. A lot
Absolutely.
of there's a complete clampdown of operations across factories. A lot of young businesses are really feeling the burn. May
True.
I ask you, as my first question, may I ask you, what have your observations been so far about the impact of the current lockdown?
Shreya, I think when you speak about fashion in India, we cannot have that conversation without looking at fashion and textiles. The two go hand in hand together. They are almost twin industries. One belongs in the next, and so on and so forth. And I think when you look at it in terms of the larger economy of India, textiles plays a massive role. You're looking at what, 12.65% of manufacturing in the GDP. Yeah, you're looking at 2.3% of India's GDP. Is where the textile contributes. Now, in that situation, you're looking at a much larger situation than just the fact that, oh, shows have been cancelled and shops have been shut. Yes, that's part of it. And that's a
That's
major part
literally
of it.
just the start.
But it's almost like, a small part of it, but that you're looking at livelihoods of people who work in fashion. You're talking models, photographers, studios,
Yeah,
designers, but you're also looking at weavers, karigars, textile, power looms, you name it. It all comes under this larger bracket, I would say, of fashion and textiles. But I think what's important right now is not to speculate too much, because I think there's always a danger in speculation. But this time does give us the time to reflect, to analyze, to watch the situation. Because let's face it, the situation is changing by the day, by the minute, by the hour.
absolutely.
So your
Absolutely.
observations today are almost irrelevant the next day. However, looking at, say, I mean, just think of it this way. We're part of humanity. The one thing we do know about that is that we're a resilient bunch. There's a lot that's happened. There's a lot that's gone on. And we seem to overcome it in some way or the other. So it's good to keep positive. I know it's difficult. But as I said, we are also part of a privileged few. I'm in a safe home,
Yeah.
in a safe space. I'm well fed. I'm looked after. You know what I mean? I can't really complain about my current situation because there's a lot worse going on the outside. But yes, industry is something we need to talk about because economies run this country. It runs most countries. And I think textiles and fashion does belong to that. So it is that larger conversation of business, of aesthetics, of creativity. It's all of it because livelihoods depend on it, lives depend on it.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, you say it so beautifully. I think also what India is known for is the fact of our beautiful codependence, interdependence with our karigars and our weavers. So,
Absolutely.
in fact, like, yes, for a lot of other countries, the first kind of impacted community has been probably, other segments on professionals of the industry. For us, actually, it is also our karigars, our weavers. And also, I mean, we got in a lot of questions before this session to say, one assumes that when we're talking about the impact on the fashion industry, we think about the designers, the manufacturing units, and everyone associated, like say from the supply end side of things. What
True.
about the models or the makeup artists and about the shows that are being canceled? They're also part of that community that is being
Absolutely.
impacted.
Absolutely. And
Um,
even if you look at the timing of this pandemic, right? It was during and before and after a lot of the fashion weeks, which means, and let's not forget our designers. A lot of the designers have worked on their collections. They're going to be
yeah,
looking at cash flow problems. They're going to be looking at issues which are going to rise up because their collections were ready, almost ready to show. So even
absolutely.
if you look at the sheer timing of it is a problem. We're not going to sugarcoat that. There's no way to do that right now for any of us. We're all working from home. We've established systems overnight, and some of us are lucky enough to be able to work from home. I think that itself is a
Absolutely.
privilege. We have
Absolutely.
access to internet and computers and Zoom calls and Insta lives.
Yeah.
So
So, Shahnaz, do you see? So I feel like the ecosystem, even before COVID,
yeah,
I think there was a sense that the system needs some reconstruction. It needs a reorganization. I think that's become more pronounced at this stage. In terms of like how do you kind of like relook, review, and analyze your supply chain? How do you kind of relook your production that has been impacted? And at the other end of the spectrum, I also feel that the world is kind of also acknowledging a lot more the fact that more and more kind of like bigger is better, faster, not fewer. It's just not a sustainable kind of way of living. So, do you feel also a shift in consumer behavior, in shopping kind of behavior to happen in the post-COVID world? Are we set to see this gravitational shift in retail as people are going to focus more on essential spends, or do you feel that we may actually go back to business as usual quicker than one imagines?
That's a really interesting question, Shreya, because you're looking at a very precarious time for us. Let's not forget, right before COVID, over the last year, we saw Gen Z rise up in revolt on climate change and sustainability, and these are still important conversations. Yes, on the back burner for a bit, because of what's happening, and there is a pandemic in tone, and uh, you have to face your issues one at a time. At the same time, you can't forget that there are other issues that have been looming for a long time. At the
Hmm.
same time, the other conversation of the mechanization of the textile industry, whether you look at the power looms or you look at fast fashion or you look at, say, the artisans on the other hand, I honestly do believe there is space in an industry for both sides. You can't say that it's just going to be artisanal and it's just going to be 100% sustainable overnight. Industries don't work that way. Economies do not work that way.
Hmm.
And if you look at it further than that, we do live in a capitalist world, and that model seems to be what it is. Whether it's working or not, I think we have to wait and watch because it's constantly changing. And we
Hmm.
have to keep track of, say, where it's going and how it's going to go after this pandemic. Looking at, say, coming back to your question about consumer trends, I do feel you have a more conscious consumer emerging. But right now we are in a strange space because we are locked at home. We are obviously living a more minimal life. Whether you want to admit it or not, you have to, because you have limited access to a lot of things that we took for granted earlier. At the
Yeah.
same time, after a period of austerity, there's usually a period of excess. I mean, we've seen it after the Great Wars. Sure, the Great Wars came, and after that, what happened to fashion? You had utilitarian fashion coming in big time, but then you had, say, Dior's New Look revolution, which was layers of taffeta, and it was gorgeous femininity and luxury and excess at its best. And I
Hmm.
think there should be space for both, because while austerity does is the need of the hour right now, there's no
Hmm.
question about that, because our supply chains are broken, our manufacturing is under
Hmm.
lockdown, our stores and shops are shut.
Hmm.
Right now, yes, you're going to see austerity. The minute, say, I think we start re-entering society, we might be a little careful, because this is a virus we're talking about. It's not the end of a war.
Yeah.
There might be
Yeah.
elation. There might be people who want to get back to their regular, normal lives. But there might be a bit
Yeah.
of caution until a vaccine is developed. Once the vaccine is developed, you might see a change again. economically speaking, we are going to see a slowdown. The IMF has already predicted it. So there's no way I think we can avoid that. And anyone with common sense, I think, can look at the papers today or the news that we're coming across and could definitely see that happening. However, I do feel we might see that little splurge happen right after. And then there may be a retreating of sorts in consumer patterns and trends, post which you might again see a kind of excessive spend. However, that does not necessarily mean you're doing away with sustainability as a concept, because let's also be honest, sustainability has been an expensive proposition when it comes to fashion to a large part, but there is also a more affordable side to it. And I think that's what we're going to see more innovation with, more R&D going into that, figuring out how can we make for better fashion. So I won't dismiss it. I won't say that, no, we're going to go back exactly like how things were, because also China is at the heart of all of this. And that has been like our manufacturing base for fashion for the longest time, and even as a consumer. So I do feel that putting all your eggs in one basket now might be looked at with a little more caution, which means you're opening up opportunity in other economies like India for manufacturing opportunities now. Who knows? I mean, maybe we'll be better off, maybe we won't. But I think right now it's too early to start picking the silver lining off it. You know, it's too insensitive as well. There are people's lives at stake right now. We need to pay attention to the sensitivity around this issue. It is a massively spreading virus. Yes, countries are doing what they can, but we have to wait and watch this situation. As for consumers, as I said, we are pleasure seekers to a large extent in the luxury market, as it should be. And there is space for that. But there is also space for more conscious consumerism. I do feel that's true. And I do feel we'll be seeing a lot more of that. And recently I was reading an article with a designer whose name I'm forgetting, but she was talking about how in her studio, they're running out of zippers now because their zipper manufacturers aren't around, but they have an excess load of buttons. Now, something as simple as that, you are going to see a change in trend, maybe in aesthetic, maybe in silhouette, but also in, say, the way we start viewing fashion, we start wearing fashion. So I think you're going to see swings and a meandering of sorts. I don't think it's going to be as clear as, oh, it's going to be completely austere, you know. But you may see also the development of smarter technologies, because if the vaccine takes longer than expected, you're already seeing most of the manufacturers start producing PPE equipment. Even in Punjab now, I think there are a couple of textile manufacturers who are producing PPE equipment. Now, in that situation, I do feel R&D is going to surge in terms of smarter clothes, maybe textiles that protect you. I don't know. I think we have to wait and watch how that goes and how this pandemic turns out. But I do feel there is scope for a lot of innovation now in fashion, and therefore in consumer, I would say consumer concerns when they're actually buying clothes. So yeah, fast fashion is not going to disappear. And I don't want it to disappear either. I think fast fashion could get a lot more conscious, sure, but you're seeing that happen now. You can't expect it to happen overnight. You know, these are entire industries, livelihoods dependent on it. Do we need better controls, better regulations? Sure, to all of that. Maybe freer trade. That's a much larger conversation to be had at I feel a healthier time in the economy as well.
You know, Shahnaz, it's so interesting what you say. So the last two sessions we had were with A.D. Singh and Riaz Amlani, and they were talking about the future of the hospitality and the restaurant industry in specific.
Yes.
And it was so interesting when we were trying to kind of gauge where are dining trends moving? Where do you think the kind of like pockets, are they going to shrink? Are they going to expand? And it's so interesting that what they said really kind of like goes line in line with what you're trying to say, saying that first of all, of course, it's too early to say anything at this stage. We're probably in initial stages of what's happening, at least in, and we're trying to see where this is moving. But to say that just at least a couple of similarities, that you may see a temporary spike in the graph towards, quicker consumption because everyone's been indoors. But actually, after that, you may see the graph kind of like go very differently for a lot of consumers. The fact about innovation, be it like the use of tech or kind of like conscious consumption, that is something that is seeping through across industry. And I find that so interesting that you're seeing, similar things even in fashion.
But, I do feel the two industries are quite interlinked, as most industries are. I mean, fashion, restaurant, hospitality. I do feel that we come from a very similar point of view on a lot of things, because in countries like India, it's still largely luxury. I mean, even if you're looking at it, yes, middle class, yes, upper middle class, that's basically the consumer market, so to speak. But it is still a luxury, as we're realizing right now. Our clothes an essential service, sure, until nudity laws change, it would be. But it's not an essential service in the way we are now seeing essential services are defined.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, no,
But
absolutely.
you're still talking about the basics, like roti, kapra, makan. I mean, it falls under that. But this is, of course, an elevated version in a way.
No, you're absolutely right. Tell me, Shahnaz, retail, obviously, I mean, the brick and mortar side of it's gotten affected hugely because of the global lockdown.
Yes.
Do you think retail would now have to add the element of digital solutions in their formula of operations?
Very honestly, Shreya, I don't think that was different before the pandemic either. I think the fact that you have a more omnivore sort of setup towards retail always works better, and we've been seeing this move into this direction for a very long time, not taking away from the sanctity of brick and mortar in itself, because you do have a certain personal experience there, especially when it comes to luxury. There is a sense of just being in the moment and with the product. However, and even when you look at, say, your artisanal products, a lot of the times when you look at our handloom stores and all of that, it is the look, it's the feel, it's a lot of that. It's a kind of direct engagement that you can't replicate anywhere else. However, the digital model has only always helped businesses from if they add on to it. If they miss that boat, that's a whole other conversation in itself. But I think we have to wake up. The digital way is the way forward. Today, the internet is as much a hero in all of this as is anyone else. I get my information from there. I get my livelihood is happening through the internet, as is yours, as is for most people. Without that, what would we be doing? As for the online market, it's all yeses right now. Yes, we need to go there. I think every brand needs to go there. Even if you look at publications like ours, for us, digital is as important as print. I don't think it needs to be this or that. I don't think that that's what we're looking at right now. But I do feel that that is the future. And it's silly to deny it. But how do we get there? Can we get internet across the board? Right now, this is still, again, a large question of privilege here. And in countries like India, I don't think we can have this conversation without mentioning that to a large extent. So if you're looking at a more democratic setup, there are a lot more advances that have to be made in terms of access to technologies, access to internet. And then we can talk about a more democratic setup, even for industries like textile and fashion and all of that.
Shahnaz, just a couple of minutes back, you mentioned something around the automation, the kind of involvement of automation into the industry. Now, for labor-intensive economies like ours, to a certain degree, say even China, would the kind of shift towards embracing more technology into your supply chain and production and manufacturing, that is going to also have an impact on employment? Yes or no?
Of course. I mean, we've already seen that, when the Pavlovs first came into India, we saw that massive, and it changes migration labor patterns, it changes a lot of things. But, it's funny you mentioned this. A long time ago, I was at a conference, and Rajesh Pratap, the designer, he said something which made so much sense to me, because he was talking about how you can't pick, it's not a this or that. It's not handlooms or power looms. It can never be that, because we're already in a world that relies on the power looms for a massive industry in itself. So there's no looking at one without the other today. I think it's more a question about employee rights, labor rights. I think it's looking at fairer ways of production, proper, just basic care for your employees. That is a conversation that needs to be had. The other conversation that needs to be had is, okay, what happens to the artisanal sector? Because there is space for them. And if you look at, say, some of the incredible work that our designers have been doing over the years, just in terms of their development with it, their innovations with textiles, you name them. And as I said, it's fundamental to Indian fashion today. You can't talk about Indian fashion without textiles almost. At the same time, you have to also look at, say, master weavers. Where is the craft going? But that's another conversation altogether. I don't think we can mix that up with, say, yes, industrialization. It's been happening for decades now. You can't fight that, but how do you grow with that? Where do you take it? So how the pandemic fits into that, we'll have to, again, do a recheck once we get back to work and see what kind of damage has been done, what kind of reparation can now be put into place. But before all of this, we need to know what the government is offering, what kind of measures are going to come in. You know, the Textile Ministry has made a couple of comments about it, and I think they are looking for a couple of packages to arrive. Hopefully, let's see now where it goes. I think we're all waiting on that across industries right now.
Across so industries, comes in, everyone's waiting for more clarity, I think, from that end. Shahnaz, again, like this is something that you're going to educate me more around. But typically around this time are kind of like the autumn-winter collections going into production. So
right now, production
are we seeing a hastier production as and when markets open, or are we looking that the fashion industry may skip a season? Can we afford to?
I think we have to wait to see that, because also the more you look at fashion, the more seasonal fashion is kind of retreating, and we're going into this all-season fashion world over. I mean, not just in terms of, say, the metaphor of fashion becoming more diverse and inclusive in terms of, say, its representation and all of that, but even in terms of our collections, because you have different seasonal patterns. Like look at Bombay and Delhi. Bombay has summer almost through the year apart from monsoons, but Delhi has a clear winter. So when you talk about summer, winter, autumn, winter, in countries like India, we're talking about a whole other question itself. Are they going to go into production? We'll have to see where the lockdowns go right now. What's going to happen? I think everyone is right now waiting with bated breath to see what's going on. And different countries are also getting out of this and further into the pandemic very differently right now. And when you look at fashion, it is a worldwide phenomenon. It is not specific to anyone. I mean, it's the needs are specific to each country, but I think we are also equally involved. And look, and Italy is a fashion center in a massive sense, and they have been drastically affected. So I think it's early days right now. We have to hesitate on this conversation for a little longer, see how things turn out, and then maybe get a clearer picture.
Yeah, no, I find that so interesting what you said, because, you know, I mean, Italy, of course, it's one of the fashion capitals for the world. I think what's also emerged is when I was reading...
I'm so sorry, I have cats outside my building who are going mad, so in case you can hear them, I apologize.
Well, can I just say, it's great to hear more animals kind of like...
That is true.
That is true. The cats and the dogs. I'm okay with it.
It's their feeding time right now, so they might get a little noisy in the background, so just ignore, but let's carry on.
Everyone who's tuned in can say hello to the cat. Shahnaz, you know, I feel like what at least when China was at its peak of you know, the lockdown, we kind of like realized, first of all, the value of their currency as a consumer. They're one of like the largest consumers for a lot of luxury brands across the globe. But also like from a manufacturing point of view, they are one of the central hubs. And now also with Italy being so severely impacted, I wonder like that next wave of ideas, because usually, and just please correct me if I'm wrong, we kind of like look at like, say, the Italy of the world to kind of like see what the next wave and the next in fashion, etc. Where is that evolving? Do you think now different pockets and different regions could also display that next wave of ideas?
I think so, but I think, you know, fashion has always been about the next wave. I think now for a bit it's going to be about the now wave. It's what is going to happen now, because I think that's where we're all at. The present has become more important than ever, because we're not at a stage where I think we can predict that far ahead as yet. And I think there is a danger to predicting too much too soon. It's one day at a time. But are you going to see other countries, other regions kind of jump into this conversation? Yes. I think they're already jumping into this conversation before the pandemic. I mean, look at say fashion that's happening in Southeast Asia, or fashion that's been happening in India or Japan, you name it. I mean, fashion has moved beyond the Eurocentric worldview for a while now, and I think we are there. You know, that conversation hopefully will not be pulled back and instead be taken forward and further forward.
Okay.
And somebody's mentioned Korean
like
fashion. So
already,
yeah, Korean fashion. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And beauty.
So that's mirroring. Oh, and beauty. Absolutely. Tell me, Shahnaz, how have you and your team, what has your kind of like work from home plan been? Has most kind of teams in your organization adopted fairly quickly to remote work?
I would say it was literally overnight, and it was amazing to see an entire company mobilize overnight. Because for us because I'm based out of the Delhi bureau for Vogue India, so I'm used to working remotely with the organization, even though we have a fully functioning office here, but it's still a bureau. But our Bombay bureau had to move remote in 2 days and 2 nights, and it was done successfully. We are all connected. We're on our Zoom calls in the morning. Yes, the mood was, I would say, tense for a bit, obviously, as everyone was. But the way we've just smoothly transitioned, I would say it's kudos to our IT team. You know, it's not often we give them the credit they deserve, but it's thanks to our IT team, it's thanks to their smooth functioning that we've transitioned pretty smoothly. Yes, there are still bumps along the way because we're used to functioning a certain way, but people have made the transition pretty easily. I would say we're back to regular business, we're back to regular programming. Regular programming in terms of, say, work processes, of course, not in terms of content, of course, because that now we have to look at what's happening today and take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable to hear someone, because you have like a big, complex organization. The structures are so vastly different from a lot of other kind of like content providers, print or online. So it's actually so heartening to hear about how you adopted change fairly swiftly. If we're talking about a matter of 48 hours.
And what's amazing is, like, even if you look at it, even from a Condé Nast international perspective, we are seamlessly in touch with each other. And it's been a surprise, and a great surprise in a way, because I think we needed a little bit of joy at very troubling times, and the fact that you can connect as often as you can carry on working on the projects that mean something to all of us, that work doesn't necessarily have to stop just because we're not under the same roof. I think it's heartening at times like this.
So Shahnaz, tell me, so in terms of like, at least we'll get to the digital in a couple of minutes, but just to address the print side of the business.
Yes.
Printing presses, I'm assuming they paused operations for now during the lockdown. So what happens to the print editions for the coming months?
So I think we have to wait on that, because some we'll have to take it 1 day and 1 week at a time. So I'm not comfortable commenting on that right now, but we'll have to take it, but it's not going anywhere as of now. It's all there.
Okay, good to know. So in terms of like kind of like the storyboarding, do stories change? Because who could have ever predicted
Shreya, I think you have the answer. Absolutely. But I think you have the answer to this. Has your content production changed? I'm sure it has. Like, look at the conversations you've been having the last week. They wouldn't have existed a month before.
Absolutely.
And I think the same way, we, as content producers, you reflect and create, and sometimes you have to react as well. And right now, with what's happening, we cannot be removed from this conversation. Of course, being a fashion magazine, fundamentally, I think you look at it in terms of what can we offer? We can offer escapist, fantastical content on one side, because you need a break sometimes from the news, the numbers, the headlines, the hashtags. And on the other hand, you can also start soothing and coping and help heal through all of this as well. You look at, and I think a bigger conversation about supporting small businesses, supporting Indian fashion. These are all conversations we are having right now. And I think we will be going into that a lot more. Even if you look at, say, the content we've been producing over the last couple of weeks, you're seeing this. It's an actively changing dialogue, I would say, that we have going on right now.
I mean, you're so right? I mean, like, who would have ever thought that kind of like teams would shift in the last, say, 3 weeks. But I sense that some of the emerging kind of like topics or like content buckets that are proving to be helpful right now are everything that is slightly more on the discussion, collaboration, kind of the coping kind of like checklist
Absolutely.
of
Absolutely.
how do you get through?
And also, I think there's a reaching out happening. I mean, as much as
Yeah.
we talk about how badly, say, the fashion industry has been affected by this, and it has. I mean, look at what's happening. Sabyasachi has donated from his personal funds.
Yeah.
Brands like Silverline in Delhi are promoting relief packages with food. I mean, it's just a great amount of support that you're seeing people reach out, not just necessarily to their own industries, but to what's going on in the country right now. Yeah, across it. And I think there is a moment of solidarity between all this. I know in countries like India, it's hard to see it at times because there is just so much wrong at the same time. But I think you are seeing a move towards solidarity across the board. I mean, just look at the hashtags that are going across right now, from In It Together to,
Yeah.
you name it, across the board with celebrities just giving out their, I mean, celebrities do what they do. They're entertaining, and they're entertaining online for free. There are stand-up comics doing live shows. There are actors doing
Absolutely.
cooking lessons.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, for those of us who have the luxury of being in safe
Yeah.
spaces at home, there is boredom setting in. There's cabin fever setting
Yeah.
in for some. They need something to pass their time, and they've got it. You know.
No, that's so true. So yesterday, in fact, I was going through an email, and a friend of mine, Nicole,
Yeah.
she works on strategies for brands, and she set up this initiative where for a certain fund kind of amount, sorry, she's going to give you X number of hours of advice, content strategy, whatever, like usually that she does in her day job. 100% is going to be donated. So I feel like people are also coming up with such innovative solutions to continue dialogue, to continue that sense of collaboration, support, help, um, even during times like this. And I
No,
find
I
that quite
agree.
hard.
I mean, I know Nicole, she's an amazing person, and this initiative sounds equally amazing, you know? And I think it's people like her across the board who are doing things like this, which are inspirational right now, and you need that bit. I know it sounds like platitudes every now and again, but every now and again,
Yeah,
you need that little bit of encouragement because let's
absolutely.
face it, they're dark times right now.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going to happen. And let's face it, none of us are very patient. And we are used to getting our instant everything, but we don't have an
Instant.
instant answer for this. So we're doing what we can do best. And I think that's the best way forward.
Um, if I may ask you a couple of quick questions before we move to the Q&A, because I see a lot of questions rolling in.
Sure.
One is something that I'm quite interested in because I see that happen in at least hospitality
Yeah.
and other forms of kind of like marketing solutions. I feel like brands are now trying to first of all assess the situation at hand, but they're also kind of redistributing their marketing spends and more towards online across kind of publication or across fashion specifically. Where do you see this swinging? Do you think brands are going to kind of be conservative, be cautious, sit tight, assess the situation, and then see where do you kind of like place that marketing spend? Or are they actually investing in influencers, in digital, online, all of it?
It's interesting because after a phase like this, when you're coming back, it's a sort of second coming of sorts in many ways for some. For some, of course, they may not be as direly struck, so it may not affect them as much. But I think everyone is going to be affected by this particular phase. Now, the deal with marketing is, I think marketing is fundamental and almost necessary for brands today. It doesn't
Yeah.
work without it. We all know that because
Yeah.
I mean, as content producers, we see more and more of it. And I think
Yeah.
on the other side, as brands, they realize the need for it as well. And
Yeah.
yes, brands do, traditionally speaking, tend to clamp down on marketing budgets the minute, say, the economy crashes or hits, because it's almost seen as a surplus extra fund. But I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me how that they've noticed that increased marketing budgets actually help a brand because you're getting the word out there. And if you logically think about it, yes, you also need to remind people that you're around, that this is what you're doing, that this is what we're seeing. I think what is more important though is that this is giving us time to reflect. Maybe it gives us time to reflect on how we put our messaging out there, and what exactly do we want to say, and how do we want to translate our brands today into the markets going forward. Because what kind of messaging is going to work? What's going to be insensitive at this given point in time? How do you say, how do you be part of this and almost help a situation rather than make it worse? And I think there's going to be a lot of introspection right now with most brands. I think they need that. We need it. We all need it. And we are, in a strange way, getting that time right now to actually figure out what comes next, especially for those of us who are working from home, for those of us whose industries have been shut down, who are not essential services. We have half the workload we had, say, a week ago. And some of us have been struck direly because we've lost our jobs, or they're on furlough, and so on and so forth. So I think you have to take a combination of things into account. But for those of us who have the luxury to reflect right now, this is the time to do it, and then figure out, okay, what are we going to look at when it comes to marketing strategies?
Yeah. No, it's so true. I read this line somewhere. Someone in the team kind of shared it on our team group, and I found it so interesting. Does anyone actually want to see your cute outfit when we're hitting recession? Is it a cavalier attitude? Is it tone deaf? Or actually, is the audience resilient enough and evolved enough that actually we know what is lighthearted content and what is fully tone deaf? And I just found that quite interesting.
It's interesting, yeah, because I think we've been asking ourselves the same question, but there is something to be said about entertainment, for something to be said about escapist content as well. I think sometimes we're very hard on that. But yes, I think there is a sensitivity with which you present that. There's a sensitivity with which you approach it. There are some things which are not relevant right now. And I think we need to stay away from that. And I think we need to be aware. We have to make ourselves aware. We have to make people around us aware as well, and take it from there. So yes, a bit of reconsideration definitely in the quality of content and the kind of content we're putting out there. Are we going to see a drop? I don't think so. I mean, even if you look at the influencers today, they are using their platforms to get word out there. Yes, there will be the naysayers who'll say they're not doing enough and this, that, and the other. And that's fair enough. I think we should have room for criticism and we should have room for dialogue. But let's appreciate things when they're doing it right as well.
No, absolutely. Shahnaz, would you mind if I get into some questions from our readers?
Sure, let's.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to now reveal my true age by wearing my glasses. All right. First up, how do you think young businesses can mold themselves to keep up with the pandemic, not just now, but also in the future?
Young businesses, that's interesting, because I think this is also a very specific question depending on the kind of business you're running and you're starting. I think I'm not an expert in terms of setting up businesses, so I don't know how much of my advice will count, but what I would say is maybe work on your strategy right now, work on where you want to go, work on, say, the things that you won't have time to work on once the economy comes back, because this is giving you that time to actually rethink your brand, to plan for your brand, to plan the long vision, the big picture. And I think you're getting that time right now, so go with that. And then, of course, based on, say, where the market is, you take it from there.
No, that's amazing. And that completely mirrors what every other, and may I just correct you here? Of course, you're a leader and an expert. You're literally saying all the right things. Everyone who's come is across the globe. Everyone is saying, guys, instead of like going into a spin, actually use this time to look inward, assess the situation, review your business models. We don't get the time.
Yeah, because this will give you that opportunity to do that. And I think for all of us, even as, say, writers and as editors, we don't get the opportunity to sometimes just introspect and reflect and figure out what comes next.
What next? Absolutely. Okay. Next question. Someone who is looking to start up in the industry, given the current scenario, would you have any piece of advice, or would it actually mirror close to what you just said?
I think it would. Like little things, work on your pitch deck, work on what you need to do once this comes back. Figure out, say, just carry on working on what you're working on. Yes, the economy will change, but I don't think startups are going to disappear anytime soon either. It might be a longer process, it might be a more tedious process, but there's still work that's going to be happening, We just have to be patient and figure out when and where and how things start falling together once we get back.
And that's so true. I mean, and also
I
like,
can't
may I
hear
just say
you
the,
at all.
can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
What I was saying was, I feel like the entrepreneurial spirit, that ain't a spirit that's going to die out anytime soon.
No, and I, in fact, think we're seeing a lot of it during this crisis. You know, it's the entrepreneurs who do rise up. It's schools which are being turned into hospitals overnight, and manufacturing units which are producing surgical masks and PPE equipment overnight. So it just goes to show that, you know, given a situation, you figure things. You have to figure
Yeah.
things out, not like you're
You
left with
figure
much
things
of a
out.
choice. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm going to combine the next few questions. Is the online market going to see a boom? And as readers and advertisers move online, how are the print kind of like tiles and titles going to adjust to what may become as a new normal in the fashion industry?
I think before we use words like new, I'm going to take the second question first. I think before we use words like new normal, we have to step back for a bit because we don't know what the new normal is going to look like. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Is self-distancing going to last longer than expected? Are these lockdowns going to end when they're going to end? These are all questions none of us have the answers to, at least not right now in this forum. And I think we have to wait that out. In terms of, say, and so, yeah, I don't want to comment on the new normal. I think it's too early to go there. I know we're always in a hurry to see. And also, I think it's nice to shake up the normal every now and again when you're coming back, when you're making a comeback. I think our normal has had a lot, the very word normal has had issues with it for the longest time. We need to be more inclusive and diverse, and we need to open up our minds a lot more in terms of what we're doing and where we're going. In terms of print, I do feel that there is something, I'm a traditionalist to a large extent. I still love my books in print form, and I still love the feel of paper, and I still love just the tangibility of a print object, and it's why I am in print as well. But I also get my news from the digital space. I get my updates from the digital space. I'm as online as I am offline, so to speak, you know. But I do feel there is room for both. Yes, they're changing industries, and maybe what we know so far will be realigned in a way. But we have to wait and see where that goes. But I'm not seeing it disappear anytime soon necessarily.
Yeah. It's so interesting what you said about what even is normal that we're trying
Yeah.
to categorize as the new normal, because I feel like any time you kind of assess business models, in fact, it's the outliers that
True.
always amaze you. So
True.
I feel like even that definition of, okay, what is going to be the new normal, it's such a tricky one to really kind of define
To
and put
come
your
up,
finger to.
especially right now, you know,
Yeah,
given our circumstances right now. Because let's face
absolutely.
it, we are in a historic moment. None of us have seen this. None of us have any experience with what this is going to look like tomorrow. So I think we have to be patient. We have to be reflective. I think that's
Yeah,
the only thing, you know, which makes sense at this given point in time.
absolutely. Okay. Next question is, what, okay, no, I'm going to skip this one, sorry. How can independent, small scale luxury brands adapt with the limited resources at hand? Tricky.
Small scale luxury, independent luxury brands, you said.
Independent luxury brands in India, how could you adapt
You
with
know, the
the Indian
greatest,
thinking?
got it. The greatest advantage, I think, of most indie brands is that the fact that they are usually creator led. And it's, you know, creator led and creator thought out. And right now, creators have the space to create. Yes, you may not be, you have limited resources, but in those limited resources, you are going to see amazing, amazing levels of innovation. And I think that is the opportunity here. Yes, it's finding that little bleak little ray of sunshine in a
Yeah.
very, very, very dark space, but
Yeah.
isn't that better than sitting around and just not doing anything? You know, like I've been looking at a lot of artist feeds on Instagram and the work they're creating at home. It's inspirational, like designers who are painting and artists who are making work out of paper when through their lives they worked on oil and canvas. I mean, it's interesting to see what else you can work with. And as I said, because it is independent, small scale brands, you have the advantage of being creator led. So entrepreneurial hats are always on.
Right. Okay. That's fantastic. Actually, I want to say not just the independent and the small scale kind of companies. I want to say mid, large. Everyone needs to adopt that advice. That's really fantastic. Last couple of quick questions. is the Indian audience ready for second-hand clothing stores? I mean, your thrift, vintage stores going
You know,
forward?
it's in this question is really interesting given what's happening right now. When I don't think secondhand clothes is an unusual concept in a country like India. We've grown up on hand-me-downs. In most homes, once we tend to donate clothes to somebody, either people we know or to donation homes, however it works. So I don't think we're that far away. Yes, maybe it'll be repackaged as vintage, or maybe if you're looking at it on a mass level, then it would be secondhand stores because you are going to see an economic downturn. But sanitizing those clothes, that's where I think the bigger question is, especially given what we're seeing right now, just making it a safe, secure, and just a sanitized. I think that's going to be the bigger concern of secondhand clothes right now, given the pandemic, of course. And even
You know,
otherwise, I mean,
it's
it's basic
really
sanitation.
interesting, Shahnaz. I don't know if you'd agree with this, but in the last, say, 12 to about 18 months or so, we've
Mm-hmm.
also seen that gap in the market on rental, the rental clothes kind of
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and that's seen like a bit of a spike. Now you have like so many websites and kind of like companies that cater to the need of like, okay, cool, you can't afford
Absolutely.
that,
And I,
1 lakh lehenga, I'm gonna
yeah,
rent it to you.
yeah, yeah. But I think that makes sense, especially when you're talking about, when you are starting to talk about sustainability in a country, or not just in India, anywhere for that matter. You are going to be
Possibly.
looking at not just throwing away things without reconsidering them. So secondhand,
Yeah.
vintage, renting, swapping. We are seeing all of
Upside.
that emerge right now. Yeah, right now, of course, as I said, with social distancing, I will be careful about these concepts for
Yeah.
a bit, but
Yeah.
it's not disappearing. It just has to find newer ways to
Yeah.
emerge, I would say. But you will see a lot more of that. There's no way we can't see that. I think considering sustainability is still one of our leading, say, goals almost, given our
Yeah.
climate.
No, absolutely. Will Okay, can you share some tips for aspiring fashion journalists given your excellent professional experience?
Tips for fashion journalists: read, watch. That's all it is. It's, I mean, honestly, not just fashion. I think any journalism, it's how much more you can
Everywhere.
absorb. Engage as much as you can. At least that's
Yeah.
what worked for me. The more I read, I still haven't read enough. I still need to read more. I mean, there's never enough time.
Oh
But
my God.
yeah.
And for Shahnaz to say that, guys, that is a lot. Right. Okay. Okay. So, Shahnaz, tell us, like, before you log off, last kind of parting words, piece of advice, for everyone who's part of this fantastic, glorious, beautiful industry. What would
You
you like to
know,
say?
I mean, this industry has been home to me and so many like me for so long that I think I'm not usually a positive person. I'm usually more cynical, a lot more cynical. Anyone who knows me will say that. But I think right now I'm hopeful, and I'm looking forward. I hope things get better, and I think we have to wait it out, and we'll be back. You know.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
all I think. Yeah, but before I do end, I do want to thank you, Shreya, for starting these conversations, for engaging, because it also helps people like me think and engage and actually reflect on so much, that's going on right now. And it gives us that moment to just share and have this conversation. It's such a privilege, seriously.
No, thank you. I mean, honestly, I feel like the amount me and like all my colleagues who are working on this, the amount we have learned and
Yeah.
benefited from these conversations, it's invaluable. So I know, it's like the corniest thing to say, oh, look at the silver lining in this whole thing. I mean, literally, I groan and I roll when I'm told to
Yeah.
look at the
Yeah.
silver
Same
lining.
here.
But if there is one, I feel just um, the knowledge sharing and
True.
also the constant kind of like gentle reminder, in fact, to
True.
look inwards, introspect, kind of be resilient,
And
and
figure out what
next
next,
time.
basically. Yeah, but I think,
Absolutely.
it's so important right now, because also you have to gear yourself up for hard times,
Yeah,
and we just have
absolutely.
to like build our resilience somehow, and then let's hope for the best.
Let's hope for the best. Shahnaz, thank you so much for taking time out. This was
Thank you, Shreya.
fantastic.
It's been my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you so much for
And I
having me.
can't wait to read your next piece.
Oh, thank you so much. I can't wait to watch your next. See you at 4.
See you at 4. Bye, Shahnaz. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. All right, so I went live.